Europe has shot itself in its foot by trying to champion itself as inclusive and diverse and a big leader in human rights. Because once you do that, you are not supposed to stop people from bringing their own culture and choosing not to assimilate with you. And when you do that, with a slowing demographic local population in Europe, you are creating a recipe for populism where the population, which is local, suddenly feels like their land is being taken away by other people. So to fix this, we first need to acknowledge and be aware of the fact that this was a mistake. Germany just announced passport controls across their land border. The EU, which is famous for championing free movement across the EU territories, is now suddenly having its member states putting passport controls. What is happening? Well, populism and hate crime is rising all across Europe. The reason, I think, are fourfold. You have the political institution, which is taking advantage of the refugee crisis and the immigrants that are coming into Europe for refuge. Number two, social media plays a big role in trying to promote negative content. And when a lot of people are looking at negative content and understanding that there's something to fear, that fear translates into something violent. Number three, us as people and how biology has always ingrained us to having a fear of things that we don't understand. And number four, which is for me the most important one, the hypocrisy and the mistake that the European Union or the European people have made in trying to champion diversity and inclusion. I will be focusing on all these four of them in a little detail in the following chapters, and my plan is to make people aware that there is more that's going on than just a problem of too many immigrants. So let's talk the political institution. Politicians have an agenda, and as much as we want to believe that democracy in the Western world works perfectly, we still have the same remnants of a politician trying to make their name for themselves and try to get into power. And that is exactly what is happening with the rising populism and the advantage that the politicians are taking. This passport control thing that happened in Germany was because the rising far-right party in Germany took control of one province, and they are now pushing for this agenda. The government of Germany is not including or not inclusive of this idea. They want to decide to go away, but because of the rising populism, all the politicians who are trying to make a name for themselves and trying to go for a power grab are able to pass these laws. The government is actively at the time of this recording trying to fight this and get this off the table. But it is very difficult when the politicians are trying to stoke the fire that's already there. And that is what I really want to focus on. A goal of a politician should be what's good for its people. But the problem is, if the people don't know what's good for them, the politician is just going to exasperate the same problem. So I want to take you down the road of understanding first a little bit more about why politicians do this, and then we move on to the media, which is allowing the politicians to do this. Every politician wants to succeed, just like every person wants to succeed. In a capitalist environment, it is very difficult for anyone to not think about themselves and try to get ahead. When that is the setting you're working with, it makes sense that you think a winner takes all mentality. And in government, where it should not be the case that it's a winner will take all because it is talking about people and not things, it works the worst there. When you have a system which gives you the advantage for being more polarized because you want to take everything, it is quite sensible for you to not collaborate and try to take everything for yourself. And that is exactly what is happening. By stoking these fires that are already existing, as we'll see, they are getting a chance to get on top and take Germany, for this example, by the collar. And I want to understand why they are able to do that. Well, that's because media is giving them access to real-time information in which they understand what the people want, or at least a false indication of what the people want. So we talked about the politician and why they're leveraging media to get what they want, which is in the end power grabbing. Now, how do they know that this is what will get them the power they're looking for? Because they look at the trending social media to see what the people are actually feeling. The problem with that is the people are actually not feeling that. Social media by design amplifies negative posts and negative feelings. There was a research done recently by a UK think tank which was trying to understand what algorithm plays a role in trying to promote what kind of content. And in YouTube, they saw when they created 5 different profiles of people with 5 different characteristics and hobbies, that they were being fed more right-wing and extremist content equally. So it doesn't matter if you like Andrew Tate or if you don't like Andrew Tate, or if you like Fox News or if you don't like Fox News. In your sign-up forms and in your viewing behavior, you will be shown both. Which doesn't make sense because the algorithm was supposed to show us what we like to see. But the reality is that's not true. It likes to show us which will get engagement, and negative news and controversial opinions and polarizing content sells. So the politicians have a false sense of what they think the people want, which is this fringe population putting out negative content outside, which gets the most traction because most people are actually not active on social media. They're passive on social media. They're not creating content, they're consuming content. And the content is being created by this active small population that wants to get their agenda out. And social media has given them a very good megahorn to put that content out because that's the content that sells. So you have a government that is trying to work for its people by using social media as a measure to see what the people are wanting. You can already see the problem there, that social media is not an accurate representation of what the people want. So you run samples, you run polls, and you see that it's divided. But why is it divided if Ahad is saying that, hey, social media is just a fringe population? Why do 50% of the people sometimes actually do believe that this is a problem, like immigration is a problem or something is a problem? So social media is actually reflecting true behavior? Can that even be possible? So European Union and Europeans in general on an institutional level really pride themselves over their inclusivity and their diversity. They're champions of the human rights of the world and they want everyone to know it. I think it's quite admirable that after Turkey, Germany was the biggest European country to take in the most refugees from the Syrian civil war. So they are doing the deed. They are trying to practice what they preach. The problem is the institutions are not realizing the short-sightedness of their actions. Europe has never tried to be strict with their culture. Europe always wanted to be inclusive and diverse, so diversity is what makes them strong. But the reality of the situation is when you see slowly your culture being eroded, the people do feel threatened. And I think that is the biggest part of the puzzle for me. The other thing that I've explained so far is natural for any country going through a crisis of populism. It happens maybe in the US, it happens somewhere else like China, it happens anywhere else like Egypt. There is no problem. It's a system that can be solved through certain kind of measures. But what the Europeans have done is caused a problem in which there's a disconnect. You want to be inclusive, you want to be diverse, you want to appreciate the different cultures people bring, and you don't want them to put it out the door or assimilate with you. No wonder that you don't see the local white population really mingling with the immigrant population. No wonder that you see different ghettos or regions of Europe becoming famous for their immigrant culture. You don't see the immigrants who become locals after being nationalized still taking part in the culture of the locals. Because there's not much requirements, there are not many strict requirements. I just became a Dutch citizen and all I had to do was learn the language on an A1 or A2 level. That is not even fluent by any means. Germany, on the other hand, wants a little bit more. But the Netherlands just recently in 2024 decided that, it needs to up it to B1, which is just one level up. Fluency, on the other hand, comes at C2. So still a long way to go. You're providing citizenships to people who are not even fluent in your language, let alone your culture. No wonder assimilation is a problem. People come here because of the better economic gains they're going to get and the promise of a citizenship of a country that's going to open up doors for them, but they might not have an intention to assimilate. And this is the only region in the world that is really interested in these things. Because if you look at anywhere else around the world, they want you to assimilate. US is the only example that comes in my head, the US and Canada, in which they go like, no, you should not assimilate, you bring in your culture. But what Europe fails to understand, US and Canada are nations of immigrants. So there is no host culture there. White people want to believe that it's their country and it's their culture, but that is not true. You had the local population living there already. White came to colonize, and then the other immigrants came for a better life. So it's a melting pot of culture there, and Europeans believe that that could be them as well, which would be true if Europe was not a nation of homogeneous cultural species. You have people who have been living here for generations in a certain type of setting, in a certain type of culture. They have their own languages and the depthness and richness of their culture, which is being eroded away now by so many immigrants who are coming in, bringing their own culture, not because they're stubborn, but because that's celebrated. You're told to bring your culture, to bring your diverse experiences to Europe and make Europe more diverse. But the local population is getting more agitated because they see their culture being eroded. A friend of mine, who is a local Dutch person, told me that if you go to Amsterdam, people don't speak Dutch anymore in front of you. You don't hear Dutch on the streets anymore. And I went there recently last week and I realized he was true. All you hear is English everywhere. Now, how would a local Amsterdammer or a local person who visits Amsterdam as a Dutch person would feel about that? And I think it is very fair for them to be agitated at this problem of lack of assimilation. I don't know the solution to it. I don't know how we can fix this. But I do understand where the problem is coming from. And that is why this part is the most important part for me amongst everything that I've explained so far that has caused the rise of populism in Europe. So to conclude, we covered 4 things. We covered the political institution that tries to leverage and take advantage of already existing problems and rise in the hate of immigrants or populism. We have a social media platform a system of algorithms that tries to take advantage of the evolutionary biases in people and amplify negative information so that the politicians take notice. We have our own evolutionary biases that for some reason we culturally and technologically want to believe do not exist. We want to understand that no, we are better than this, but for some reason we don't want to be aware of the fact that this does play a role. And this is the reason why social media does what it does best and is able to amplify all the negative voices. It's because we are the people who click on it. We are the people who get engaged by this kind of content because we are evolutionarily driven to look for these kind of things. And finally, Europe has shot itself in its foot by trying to champion itself as inclusive and diverse and a big leader in human rights. Because once you do that, you are not supposed to stop people from bringing their own culture and choosing not to assimilate with you. And when you do that, with a slowing demographic local population in Europe, you are creating a recipe for populism where the population, which is local, suddenly feels like their land is being taken away by other people. So to fix this, we first need to acknowledge and be aware of the fact that this was a mistake. And yes, it should be normal to be asking anyone who comes to live in a country to assimilate into that country's traditions and cultures. You go to any other country in the world, you go to the US and you have to assimilate. Even though US is a country of immigrants, yet they ask you to assimilate. You go to Saudi Arabia, they ask you to be respectful of their norms. When we went to Qatar for the World Cup, they asked you to be respectful of their norms. How much was that implemented is something else, but they asked you officially as an institution to respect their norms. You go to Pakistan, India, you go to any other country in the world, they will ask you to respect their local traditions and their local cultures. Europe is the only place where you can go and be like, I don't approve of this, and they're like, you can have your own right and you have freedom of speech to say whatever you want. And you can always bring in your own culture and you don't have any need to assimilate with us. That is a recipe for disaster.